explicitly valuing ecosystem services in economic analyses and national climate adaptation strategies, implemented through multi-stakeholder partnerships and long-term stewardship. Mr. Speaker, this is how we honor the legacy of our forefathers, and this is how we build and protect Jamaica, which is not only our desire, but certainly our destiny. This is how we safeguard our water, our land, our forests, our food systems, and our future. And this is how we honor the responsibility to generations yet to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from St. Mary Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by congratulating the Minister on his ascendance to the presidency of the 8th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Congratulations. Any positive development on the global stage redounds to the benefit of all Jamaicans, and so we celebrate with you. Minister, this statement isn't controversial. There isn't much, if anything, in it that you will find objection from this side. I visited in St. Elizabeth, the cockpit country myself, and I've seen firsthand the devastation on just the forestry. In fact, residents were telling me that areas that I could see a clear view. Generally, for decades, they've never seen what the other side of forests look like. What I want to know, though, Minister, is whether any consideration is given to mobilizing just members of the population who might be interested in not the National Tree Planting Project, but the Reforestation Project. Because this is a major undertaking. You may not be able to readily find the resources from your budget lead the full recovery with 50% of loss in terms of forestry areas. So I'm wondering whether any attempt will be made to just mobilize the general population who's very interested in any event, volunteer, and to assist. Another question, Minister. I note the move to plant fruit trees as a part of the forestry program. And even though I suspect the professionals at forestry would have considered it, I just want to ensure that we're considering the local ecosystems and the things that life in those ecosystems generally depend on, to ensure we're not replacing trees with trees that might create additional harm. But as stated at the beginning, you have my full support in terms of replanting and rebuilding the forestry and the environment on a whole. One love.
Let's have one question for you. I'm aware that the effect of Melissa in relation to our forests includes the extensive creation of bio-waste, meaning branches, leaves that were broken, trunks of trees snapped, etc. So on the forest floor, you have an excessive amount of wooden detritus, wooden waste. And the risks of forest fires, bushfires, from that waste which is lying there and which will be, over time, degenerating into drying out and becoming more and more flammable, is a real risk. And I was wondering whether there's any strategy for trying to address that, the heightened risk of forest fires in our forest areas as a result of what Melissa has left behind. I know that we've had problem with bushfires, you know, in the St. Andrew Hills and so on for many years. But this seems to be a particularly extraordinary situation. And if you fly over the forest, you see it there on the forest floor. And it's very striking because of the extent of it. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that issue.
Oh, sorry, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and acknowledge your congratulations and thank you for your warm words related to the Union presidency. Very short in response. I would have just shared with the member from Central St. Mary the process to volunteer for the Replant Jamaica initiative. We have benefited from over 1,000 Jamaicans who have signed up through the forestry website, and there are also several hundred who have signed up through the initiative being led by Minister Grange for replanting initiatives to come. So you are right, it will require all hands on deck, and we'll keep you in the loop. So certainly, as is usual, the youth groups of both political parties will engage in environmental stewardship when the time is right. We've taken great care to analyze the ecosystems, and we won't plant anything that is harmful to the standard ecosystems by area in those areas. A lot of the fruit trees, as we've found, certainly from a demand standpoint, tend to go into the urban areas and peri-urban areas. That's where you have the greatest demand, and people do rush to get them where they have land space to plant. I think good observation from the leader of the opposition related to the bio-waste. This is particularly concerning, not just for fire, but because of the nature of our geography. Many of our weep holes, especially in the cockpit country, can be blocked, and that can stop water absorption. So it creates a risk for water insecurity, land slippage, and it's a challenge all around. The scale of the devastation doesn't allow any boutique solutions. We are at risk for fires, at risk for blockage of some of our aquifers being recharged, and will be so for a prolonged period. You know, we're not sitting back and not doing anything. We've engaged our partners in the international community and are designing a solution. At the appropriate time, I'll share that solution with the House. But I do want to acknowledge that there is significant risk, Mr. Speaker, to increased forest fires, which is why we're happy with the recent, usually the dry season, because we are at risk from forest fires at a significant increased rate. And that is shown in our bushfire warning index, which was designed as one of our climate change projects and is housed at the Jamaica Fire Brigade. I also want to acknowledge the help from the Fire Brigade, Minister Mackenzie, with the Forestry Department for the assessment process that we are undertaking with this. But for members' knowledge, and just in closing, that bushfire warning index would have been launched approximately 3 years ago, and it has significantly reduced response time from the Fire Brigade to our forest fires. So even your fires that you normally have in the coffee districts, etc., they've been able to, over the last 2-3 years, even in very bad droughts, been able to respond much faster. But we expect that to be tested significantly over the next 3 to 4 years. And I do share your concern, and there isn't a silver bullet in resolving that. But I do thank members for their questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
House Leader. Sorry. Announcement.
Laid on the table of the House are the following: the National Housing Trust Housing Benefits Special Selection Juno Crescent Housing Project Order 2025 under the National Housing Trust Act, Annual Report of the Bath Fountain Hotel for the year 2021-2022, Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Montego Bay Convention Center for the financial year 2021-2022, Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Jamaica Promotions Corporation JAMPRO for the year 2023-2024, Auditor General's Department Annual Report 2025, Auditor General's Department Performance Audit Report, ensuring value for money in the public health procurement at the University Hospital of the West Indies, Independent Commission of Investigation, second quarterly report 2025, April to June 2025. Independent Commission of Investigation, third quarterly report 2025, July to September 2025. Investigation into concerns that Ms. Sashina Fuller, a securities analyst employed to the Financial Services Commission, failed to file her statutory declarations with the Commission for the year 2023, contrary to law. Investigation report into concerns that Ms. Tamika Aplik, a securities analyst employed to the Financial Services Commission, failed to file her statutory declarations with the Commission for the year 2023, contrary to law. And also, members, the Honorable Speaker of the House, the Most Honorable Juliet Holness, wishes to give formal notice of her absence from this sitting of the House of Representatives on account of her traveling overseas on official business. Thank you.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, report from committees. Notices of motion given orally. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give. I will move to introduce and have read a first title, Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2026. I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take first reading of the bill.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read the first time a bill short entitled the Jury Amendment Act 2026. I further beg to give notice that at the later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable to take first reading of the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next sitting of the House, I intend to move the following motion. Whereas Jamaica's core utility networks, specifically telecommunications systems, electricity grids, and potable water infrastructure collectively constitute essential national assets, indispensable to public safety, national security, economic stability, health, disaster response, and the functioning of key institutions, including hospitals, emergency services, financial systems, schools, and public administration. And whereas there has been a marked and troubling increase in incidents of theft, vandalism, sabotage, and unlawful interference targeting telecommunications infrastructure, electricity distribution systems, and water supply assets, resulting in service outages, economic loss, threats to life, disruption of emergency operations, and reduced national resilience. And whereas acts of theft or interference with these essential utilities are currently prosecuted primarily under general criminal provisions, such as simple larceny, conversion, and malicious destruction of property, which do not adequately reflect the grave national implications, economic impact, and public safety risks created by such offenses. And whereas the penalties available within the ordinary criminal and summary jurisdiction framework, particularly at the level of the parish courts, are insufficient to deter sophisticated or organized criminal activity directed at utility infrastructure. And whereas international standards in comparable jurisdictions recognize electricity, telecommunications, and water systems as critical infrastructure, requiring sector-specific legislation, elevated penalties, specialized offenses, and enhanced investigative power, including models such as Australia's Security of Critical Infrastructure Act framework, Taiwan's Critical Infrastructure Reforms, and the US's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Act protections, And whereas Jamaica's vulnerability to hurricanes, natural disasters, cyber threats, and national emergencies require the uninterrupted functioning and robust protection of electricity supply, telecommunications networks, and water systems, be it resolved that this honorable house formally declares Jamaica's electricity, telecommunications, and water networks to be critical national infrastructure, essential to public safety, national development, and disaster resilience. Be it further resolved that this honorable house calls upon the government to undertake, as a matter of urgency, a comprehensive review of the legislative and regulatory framework relating to the protection of utility infrastructure, with particular focus on electricity, telecommunications, and water systems. Be it further resolved that such review include consideration of 1, the creation of comprehensive sector-specific legislation to be styled the Critical National Utility Infrastructure Protection Act or similar. 2, the establishment of specialized offenses relating to theft, vandalism, damage, or unlawful interference with electricity, telecommunications, or water infrastructure, with penalties commensurate with the national risks posed. 3, designating such offenses as indictable only triable in the Supreme Court, thereby enabling the application of appropriate sentencing powers and investigative processes for complex or organized criminal actions. 4, enhancing investigative and enforcement mechanisms, including mandatory coordination among the Jamaica Constabulary Force, Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecoms and Transport, Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, the Office of Utility Regulations, and the affected utility operators. And 5, reviewing and strengthening the regulatory framework governing the scrap metal industry to reduce illicit markets that incentivize theft of utility assets. 6, benchmarking legislative options against international critical infrastructure protection models and incorporating relevant best practices. And be it further resolved that this honorable house recommends that a joint select committee be convened to receive submissions from the operators of the electricity, telecommunications, and water sectors, to receive expert input from regulators, law enforcement, legal specialists, and civil society stakeholders, examine the national economic, security, and disaster resilience implications of utility infrastructure vulnerability, and report to the House with recommendations for comprehensive and modernized legislation to strengthen the protection of Jamaica's critical national utility infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions. Be resolved that notwithstanding Standing Order 68.3 and in accordance with Standing Orders number 68.1K 73D, this Honorable House appoints the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee, comprising the following members: Pernell Charles Jr., Delroy Chuck, Audrey Marks, Marissa Dalrymple Filbert, Matthew Samuda, Julian Robinson, Dayton Campbell, and Angela Brown Burke. Integrity House. Be resolved that this Honorable House appoint a select committee comprising of the following members: the Honorable Olivia Grage, Mr. Andrew Morris, Mrs. Marlene Malahoo Fort, Mrs. Juliet Cuthbert Flynn, Miss Joyce Denise Daly, Dr. Angela Brown Burke, to sit jointly with a similar committee to be appointed by the Senate to consider and report its findings to this Honorable House on an act entitled the Domestic Violence Act. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Question and answers to questions. Motion that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motion relating to sitting of the House. Motion for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2026.
Members, the question is that the standing orders be suspended to allow the minister to take the first reading of the bill. Those in favor, those against, the ayes have it. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2026 be read a first time.
A bill shortly entitled the Financial Administration and Audit Amendment Act 2026 read for a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Members. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the Jury Amendment Act 2026.
Members, the question is that the standing order be suspended to allow the minister to take the first reading of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the Jury Amendment Act 2026 be read the first time.
A bill shortly entitled the Jury Amendment Act 2026 read for a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Good morning, God. Today is Tuesday.
Public business.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question is that the House, The question is that the standing order be suspended to enable the minister to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the two notices have to treat with the appointment of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee and also the members that will sit jointly with members of the Senate in relation to the review of the Domestic Violence Act. I ask that the motions be approved.
The question is that the motion be approved. The question is that the motions be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, we had started debate on the motions moved by the member from St. Catherine Southwestern, and it is the intention to conclude those debates today. I do see an indication from the opposition, the member from St. Andrew Southwest, that she will be contributing to the debate. If there are any other members, we'll take them now. We also have the member from St. Mary Central, and then we will move to have the member from St. Catherine Southwestern close the debate on the motion. Because there are several motions which have been moved. The members could indicate what motion. There's several motions which have been moved. The member wants to close all of them today. You could just highlight which motion you're speaking on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to start with just a couple of comments as it relates to number 2, motion number 2, which has to do with the amendment to the Representation of the People's Act. I want to say that it is obvious that the member has taken some time to look at the process of election and to look at some of those areas that are troublesome and that need attention. I must say that for the second one, which is the one I'm talking about, which really deals with introducing other implements other than the black lead pencil to be used to make a mark for the candidate, and also where it refers to also introducing other marks that could signal the choice of candidates. I must say that I vehemently oppose both, and I'll tell you why. At first glance, it sounds like something that makes sense and that is easy to do. However, in my head, I am still very clear of the Jamaica in which I live. And I am also very clear that we still talk about the golden ballot. We still talk about individuals who pay persons to come in and vote a particular way. And who, no, I tell you, Moran Bay teaches me well.
This is your moment to drive forward with KIG. Get behind the wheel of a brand new Ford or Subaru.
Very clear. Very clear. And so, my concern, Mr. Speaker, is that we could be in an election, for example, like the by-election in Moran Bay, and individuals from the other side pay individuals, pay voters to go into the polling station and to make a mark in a particular way. Because we have now made the changes for a specific mark to be used. It would then clearly identify, let's say, of the 20 persons that you have targeted to get a vote in a particular way, you would be able to say 18 of them delivered because they had that specific mark, or because they went in and used a specific implement. I believe that the trust that in the last, certainly in the last election, has been severely damaged, is not one that will allow me to vote in favor of this motion. So that is 2. As it relates to number 3, again, it is around changes to the ROPA, where it asks for changes as it relates to the outdoor. I do agree that some changes are required. The first one being a general understanding of the limits for the outdoor agents and where they stay, and the fact that they can't be too far away. Yes, I agree with that. What was missing, and I thought you would have included, remember, is also the idea of where the voters stand, because at some polling location, some persons as the voters needing to stand outside the compound, while others interpret it as standing close to the polling station. And what that means is that if you have 5
Three. Thank you.
2 of the 5 might have nobody in there. But a long line is outside.
Thank you.
Yes, with individuals, and you're not allowing now persons for all of the stations to come in. I would have loved to see that included. Let me tell you why I am very hesitant, and in fact I'm not willing to support the movement of the outdoor agents closer inside, because the outdoor agents do interact with voters, and I would fear closer to the voting station, the polling station where voting is going to take place, that we might have fierce competition between the outdoor agents interacting with the voters. And I see that as being problematic. And so on that count, I do not support that motion either. I will leave the others 5. Motion 5. I want to start by commending the progress that we have made and agreeing to date in terms of creating an atmosphere of a free and fair election and free from fear. And this has been done in truth by both parties working really hard together. As I said earlier, and I really do believe it, so I'm going to have to say it, but I believe that some of what has happened in more recent times has damaged the trust. Yes? No. It has damaged the trust. And I say that, and I put it on record here. Mr. Speaker, we cannot disregard the concern around the system could be, or where the system allows for partisan behavior. Yes? I know that the rules of the EOJ requires that individuals who are politically affiliated do not become workers for the EOJ, which I support wholeheartedly. And so when individuals come to me and said, oh, MP, I went down and they said A, B, C, and D, I said, they are correct. But it is alarming, Mr. Speaker, as to the level of partisan pro-JLP behavior by some of the key members and workers of the EOJ on election day. Yes? And so that should be a matter of concern. And it therefore suggests, in my view, that the JLP is getting a deliberate pass for some of that. And this is leading to why I'm taking the position that I will. In 2025, we saw some deliberate slowing down of the votes in areas. Some persons suggest that it could actually be deliberate sabotage. I don't have the data, I don't have that, but it's something that we cannot ignore. Key persons, we actually saw, and members have documented key persons, key members affiliated with the government using their connections and their authority to direct what happens in a polling station using their usual bullying approach. Yes. All of what I have said earlier, Mr. Speaker, makes it clear to me that the suggestion of allowing a presiding officer to present a ballot without removing the counterfoil when the voter brings it back, yes, allowing that counterfoil to be removed and counted, for me, presents clear and present danger. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. I am going to add to that the issue of the special. Yes, it's five, the seven motions about. Let me tell you why I'm concerned about that. I would hate to see special ballots being in the hands of individuals who go into a polling station, yes, and get back to the presiding officer now to be dropped in the ballot. And all that needs to happen is to remove the counterfoil and to put it in the ballot box. No. So what that means, Mr. Speaker, anything for me that allows for a manipulation, yes, of the ballot, the marking of the ballot, and all of that, for me, is a no-no. Because where there are issues, instead of insisting on a proper public education campaign, that therefore puts the voter, the partisan workers, the party workers, the EOJ workers, to guarantee that before the ballot is given, that the counterfoil is removed, or that the correct pencils are in the stations to be used. What we do is find ways around it, and I believe that that is a dangerous precedent and a wrong way to go. And so, again, I would want to say that motion does not have my support. I move to motion 7. I like the idea of a motion to look at the qualification of persons to run for the Houses of Parliament. Motion 7. I like that idea. And I'm pleased that it comes at this point because we have just completed an election campaign and it's fresh in our minds. But when I look at the discrepancy between the voting age of 18 and the age at which someone can run for candidates, one being 18, one being 21, I agree that anomaly could do with some change. And I agree with making them both 18. And I think that is a good suggestion. Mr. Speaker, when I look at the other provisions for persons, and I look at being a Commonwealth citizen, ordinary resident in Jamaica for 12 months prior, I said to myself, and I'm sure that all Jamaicans will agree with me, and would insist on those as being two important qualifications for anyone to run for the House of Representatives. So I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I like that. Like me, however, I am thinking of the many other Jamaicans who are also clear that these are important provisions, but who might be trying to square that with the brutal campaign that we saw being waged. And what am I talking about? When individuals in this very house presented candidates who were either Israeli citizens, US citizens, yes, born in England, yes, knowing and agreeing on the two major qualifications, none of which they would have violated. So we are good. But what they have done with a brave face of hypocrisy is to stand on that and turn around Jamaican was able to staunch the criticism from those hypocrites who were putting forward candidates who were in the same position, if not worse. In fact, worse is in fact that member who is shown allegiance to the US but sat in this parliament, yes, with the cover of the hypocrisy from her colleagues. And then you have the effrontery, and then you have the effrontery to present before us this motion number 7 as if you really have it at heart, the real protecting the Constitution and protecting Jamaica. Rubbish. And I am saying that those individuals who support motion 7 or who bring this motion to us, they should have burned in fire, burned in hell.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to comment on these motions that have been put before us. And I want to start, Mr. Speaker, by going back to a principle that
Is there a motion in particular that you're speaking to, or
all
just general?
of them. Right. So, Mr. Speaker, these are very important matters that have been brought for our consideration and approval. But I want to go back to a fundamental principle that has guided us through a period of tremendous turbulence to one where today we accept free and fair elections as a given. And that process has been assisted, umpired under the umbrella of the ECJ, the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. And as a parliament, we have been very careful not to proceed with anything that will affect that law, the Representation of the People's Act, which is properly administered by the ECJ, without getting them involved, without consultation, without seeking their input. And it is for good reason. Firstly, both our parties are represented at the ECJ. The ECJ does command the respect, and it is not seen to be a part of the cut and thrust of our political living, of our political living. And Mr. Speaker, I would be loath to proceed to approve these motions, and some of them are very important and fundamental, without hearing, firstly, the considered input of the ECJ. And I will urge this House to defer these matters, all of them, to enable the ECJ to reflect on, to come back to us, and as we have always done, to accept their recommendation without question. And I want to put that to this House as a response, an appropriate response to the motions that are before us. And I so put, Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Member from St. Mary Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. speak on motion number 1 in support of it. Mr. Speaker, I believe motion 1 seeks to cure a major injustice. As a member of parliament, Mr. Speaker, I sometimes have a major challenge explaining to constituents who live in housing schemes that have been developed for many years, and the roads are in a state of disrepair. And those roads have no owner within the government, Mr. Speaker. You can't tell them that works agency can respond. You can't tell them that the municipal corporation is not, rather it's a bad father, no owner. Even notwithstanding the status of that bastard that still exists, I think, Mr. Speaker, I would want to go a little further. I think the government, the motion should also call on the government or ask the government to put a lien on a certain percentage of the properties in new developments. I tell you why, member. When somebody lives in a community and they're paying property tax, which they're told is supposed to take care of some of the infrastructure, and they live in a community which is a subdivision which is approved, or a scheme that is approved by the government and approved by the local authority, and they buy it with that confidence that it has the approval of their government and their local authority. It's a wickedness to tell them that government can't touch their road and can't address their infrastructure when it is in a state of disrepair. And so I'm wondering whether the member would be open to amending the motion to also, instead of just handing over the roadway to the local authority and putting the can over to the local authority, when these developers would have, as a condition of doing the development, would have undertaken to do the development of the roads. Right, so the roads would need to be handed over in a particular condition that is acceptable to the local authority. So I'm wondering whether we shouldn't be asking that a lien be put on a certain number, is there no, on a certain number of the property, so that it can be liquidated, so residents don't have to carry the bag when these roads fall in disrepair, or when the local authority is not prepared to take it over. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I want to briefly speak to two of the motions. The first being the second motion having to do with the ROPA. And in this regard, the suggestion by the motion that we change the way that someone votes is welcomed and probably long overdue. We do have a large segment of our community, of our society, who believe an X indicates wrong. And so for that reason, as simple as it sounds, do not engage in the voting process. And so I welcome that aspect of the motion. As the other member said previously in our contribution, I would want us to give consideration to the implement which is used, because this can be a security feature in the voting process, but also to restrict the kinds of marks that would be accepted instead of making it open to any mark. There are marks which are positive, and people might find that more acceptable as a way of indicating their vote. So with those two suggestions, I am in support of the motion. Motion 6, which has to do with the voters list. Again, in support with a couple suggestions for consideration in terms of changes. The links between the different agencies that have custody of data. I think we should have a conversation, or if the motion can facilitate us ensuring that there's a stronger linkage among these agencies, namely the RGD, the EOJ. I mentioned this, Mr. Speaker, because what that would mean is that the verification process, the process of removing those who've passed on or who have migrated from the voters list, would be almost, well, easier, not automatic. but certainly easier than it is now. But controlled by these agencies once you have, for example, proof of death, and that can be done without having to revert to the local EOJ office. The other aspect of this, which I think is important to look at, is making the re-verification process having a required time frame for the re-verification process. So at the moment, we do not have an established time frame, and I think a periodic review, 10, 15 years might be, we link it to the census. Would be one way to go, just to ensure that we're not back here in 10 years saying we need money for re-verification. And so, again, with these two suggestions for consideration, I would support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Portland Eastern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to simply say that I certainly cannot support.
Member from West Central, Senji. Right, thanks. Go ahead.
Cannot support motion 4. I don't think as a country we are here to, we are there yet. Jamaica, as it is a two society Jamaica. The reality is that crime is so high, it's hard at sometimes to regulate. Whenever the night comes, many things can happen. To protect the integrity of the electoral process and increase even by 1 hour would be dangerous. We should look or try to consider, especially the geographical locations of some areas, whether it could at all, even with the advancements in technology, support an increase in the voting hour. As it is right now, the integrity of the voting process, the containment, the best way to contain is the time constraints. There are many other things that can be considered in terms of how ROPA, with an amendment, can regulate how the private sector treats with the ability of voters to get the time to actually go and vote without fear of intimidation or loss of income or whatever it is that would prevent them from participating in the process. But one of the greatest ways to protect the integrity of the process is to be in keeping with the time in our current state. Now, even as this bill is intended, or this motion is intended to increase the time without the technology being implemented across all constituencies and in all polling stations. In the last election, and using the data and using experience and the information, there are polling stations that don't even have light, and it was still used. And we do have information. I can speak in relation to Portland Eastern. There were polling stations that were allowed to stay beyond the 5 p.m. time. And what happened during that time, the integrity of the voting process was compromised. Not the last election. That is exact at 5. But to increase it at 6, and we're dealing with the time, and we're dealing with how the sun rises and how the sun sets, and that's something that we have to look at. And so we're talking about all of those things when we think about the integrity, right? And I don't need to coin a term, but to say that the thieves come out at night, right? And people need to understand that. I could direct that to you as well, but you haven't said that on record. But while it is that we must, when considering the electoral process, to ensure that voters and the voting process is not compromised and persons are disenfranchised, time constraints is also important given the reality of Jamaica. So I just simply, in relation to motion 4, to say that I would invite this house to also reject the increase in time. I do support you on motion 1 in its entirety. Thank you.
Member from West Central St. James. She was before the show. Why are you shouting?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Seeking permission to speak from a seat other than my own. I rise to make my contribution to the various motions moved by the honorable member from Southwest. Mr. Speaker, in respect of motion number 1, the problem identified in the motion, I think, is one that practically all of us here are acquainted with. I put on record my support for either a single road authority or at minimum a dual road authority separating the toll roads from the other roads. But what we have now is almost a complete nightmare. We have the toll authority responsible for the toll roads, the National Works Agency responsible for the main roads, the local authorities through the municipal corporations or other municipalities responsible for community roads, and the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries responsible for farm roads. Then we have private roads, and we have all kinds of other categories, and a host of roads that no one has taken responsibility for. So the problem is a real problem. But at this time, Mr. Speaker, I believe that it requires more than what the member is asking for to bring a meaningful solution to the problem. In respect of motion number 2, the issue of the implement is a matter that the courts have pronounced on. And I believe that the wisdom behind the black lead pencil is one that remains true today. Because any implement, the use of any implement may prevent a detection of voter fraud. And so I would recommend to the member that the motion be amended to delete the first resolution. And in respect of the second resolution, I would ask for the member's consideration to amend it, for the amendment to ascertain the intention of the voter and not simply that any mark on the ballot be used. Because this is an issue that the courts have also pronounced on and has drawn a distinction between marks that make a mockery of the electoral and democratic system. But I believe, Mr. Speaker, in a population where X means wrong and a tick means yes, and given the level of literacy, and also the fact that different presiding officers take inconsistent positions on 2 X's, 3 X's when the intention of the voter is clear, I think the time has come for the legislation to be amended to ensure that in counting a ballot, the ballots, or inspecting the vote, that you ascertain the intention of the voter. In respect of motion number 6, asking for a re-verification of the list and the provision of funds to do so, I support it. I think that list truly reflects what obtains in accordance with addresses a number of complex issues. Section 39 of the Constitution is a deeply entrenched provision. If you look at section 49, subsection 3b, you will see that section 39 is one of the listed provisions, and it cannot be amended by simple majority or even by a superior majority. Ultimately, it will require a referendum, the approval of the electorate. The motion is also asking for a deletion of the provision dealing with conflicted allegiance in the Constitution. I believe it would be a wrong move at this time. With wars and rumors of wars, parliaments increasingly will have to take decisions, and it is important that members of parliament have no conflicted allegiance when they have to make decisions between different countries. I would recommend to my friend that this motion be withdrawn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would only like to speak to one of the motions, and that is motion number 1. Mr. Speaker, I am in full support of this motion, especially where there's an entire section of the constituency I represent, which was inherited from Central St. Catherine, not calling the name, where all of the roads in every single scheme is bad. And in 2026, where we have tax-paying citizens who would have made tremendous sacrifice to purchase homes, to expand those homes, and to make sure that they form community groups and have neighborhood watches and strong community unions, they have to be wearing one shoes to come out of the road. When they reach on the real main road, they have to put on another shoes to go into the taxi to go to work. In 2026, I am most distraught for the people of Lakemore, Fillmore, Strathmore Gardens, Avon Park, Monticello. I am very, very distraught because them is more than bastard children. They are forgotten and have been forgotten for decades. And I am afraid that I don't make the excuse that the road does not belong to this one or that one. I refuse to tell anybody that when I ask them to make me their representative. I believe we have a responsibility here. It doesn't matter which authority you're talking about. The municipal corporation must deal with municipal roads because we must have that kind of flexibility. And we can tell you there was a REACH program in this house that took forever because the National Works Agency certainly just did not have the capacity to be able to manage all of what needs to be done. So we don't need to be eliminating another authority to be able to assist with the process of getting these roads repaired. Another matter, Mr. Speaker, relates to the deep pushing of unoccupied lots in these housing schemes as well. They buy the lots, they go overseas, and it is overgrown, and it attracts rodents, it attracts criminals, it even attracts crocodile. In Strathmore Gardens, there was a crocodile in the bush on a lot, and we had to be calling NEPA to assist, and I'm simply saying this is the road on which there are 2 children's homes, right? So we are at a place now where the member from Southwest, you know how passionate I feel about this one. We have a responsibility to the people in the housing schemes who continue to make the sacrifice to do what we ask them to do, to work hard, and buy a little piece of this rock named Jamaica. And then when they do so, they have to be hiding because they're not proud of where they live. They're demotivated. It is depreciating the value of their homes as well. Nobody no want to buy no house down there so because of no taxes will go on those roads anyway. So they must walk from the entrance to their homes. It is time really come for true to make sure. Remember, I support you 100%. 150%. I'm also thinking that we need to attach a caveat to them people when them go to the tax office, they must pay. If they're not paying to maintain these lots, we must cut those lots, attach the money to it, and make them pay. Every time you pay your tax, you must pay for the maintenance of your lot. And if you don't do that, then we have other sanctions, right? And I'm simply saying, but we have to make it law so that it is not incumbent on any discretionary power of any municipality. No, the law doesn't state that you can put a caveat. You cannot. So I'm suggesting that we need to move a foot further. Instead of just saying simply, let us do better. Let us put the things in place to get the better done.
Mr. Speaker,
I won't be long. I know you're anxious to wrap up. Just to say, I too support the first motion. I think it's absolutely horrendous when you go to these schemes and see the roads which have essentially been abandoned by all authorities, and people pay their money, pay off mortgages, they're in the schemes, and they can't rely on any authority to maintain those roads. And I've seen it over and over again in several different parts of Jamaica. So I support that motion. I would also say that I think the argument was made, well, the authorities should only have to take it over if the roads have been built by the developer. But at the end of the day, who suffers are the residents. And the risk should be borne by the authorities, not by the residents, because the authorities can put in place laws and measures and conditions to ensure that the developer does what they're supposed to do. So the onus should be shifted to the authority and taken up by the residents. So I support that. The only thing is a small point. I was saying that in the motion, in the last prayer, it speaks to these roads being transferred to local government, KSAC, which no longer exists, KSAC, and any other local authority, including, but not limited to the National Works Agency. I was just making the point, National Works Agency is not a local authority. So the way that's worded is a little inelegant and inaccurate, but it can be fixed. On the other motions to do with the Representation of the People's Act, I endorse what the Leader of Opposition Business in the House has said. I think the House should not rush to come to a conclusion on amendments to ROPA without the considered input of the ECJ and the staff who are responsible for elections. That is a tradition. And speaking for myself, these technical matters, I would not want to vote in favor of something that I may not have considered all the relevant factors and end up having been told that we've supported something that is unworkable or is inappropriate or that we ought to have voted against. I would love to see this being sent elsewhere to the ECJ specifically for their comments before we take any position on these resolutions to do with the ROPA, the Representation of People Act. And I wouldn't want our side to vote in favor of motions which have not had that opportunity, because we've been endorsing a procedure which I think is flawed and is inconsistent with a good tradition that has been built up over many years in this parliament. In relation to the last one, which I think is to do a constitutional amendment, it has very far-reaching implications. It's essentially eliminating the restriction on dual citizenship for membership of the parliament. And I do think that the public has strong views on this, and I believe that we should have a process before, again, the parliament rushes into that kind of thing. So I would support what the member for West Central St. James has suggested in relation to that last motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the members for their input in the debate and desired private member's motion. But the member from Southwest St. Andrew raised some issues that she believes
political consideration or whatever. Let me make it clear. When I brought these private members' motion, I did not consider anything that had to do with politics. And the motions were not laid in any sense to benefit me in any way at all. Because if these amendments are made, it won't affect me because I won't be contesting again. So I'm doing this. Take my word this time. Take my word this time. So I'm doing this for the future. And having won 8 elections so far, I know what the situation is and what affects our candidates and the electoral process. And this is why I brought this stuff. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to private members motion 1, the member mentioned the single road authority and the rest of it. But this is a different issue from the single road authority. What I want is for the authority to take responsibilities for the infrastructures in housing scheme where you have citizens who have paid money, bought their units, and still nobody is responsible for them. So that's all I'm asking for. As it relates to the single road authority, then I'll come back with another motion for that. But I'm asking for the government to make sure that the issue of responsibilities take over. So I just want to, as the lead opposition mentioned, the National Works Agency not being a local authority, I just want to mention, or any other local authority, as well as the National Works Agency, to make that amendment to number 1, to the pride set for motion number 1. Number 2, the member mentioned the issue of using different implements apart from the black lead pencil. I accept her suggestion there, and I would want to delete the priors in private members motion number 2 and substitute as such. Be it resolved that the relevant provision of the PROPA be amended to enable the intention of the voter to be ascertained instead of mandatory that the voter shall mark an X beside the candidate's name. So I'm asking here for intent, but to remove the issue of any implement. So I'm asking for amendment to delete those 2 priors and to replace it, substitute as such. As it relates to number 3, she mentioned that it was not mentioned as to where, as it relates to the voters, they should stay. That can be dealt with later on. But I'm asking now that the outdoor agents that are stipulated by 41A subsection 1, they're by law. So you should have the one-day police or the security force bodies can have to stay down the road. If they are provided for as the indoor agent in the ROPA, then they should be recognized as such and should be at a place where they can carry the responsibilities effectively than having a one-day police and the security force telling go down the road. There are times when you have the one-day police or the security force are political and they take political actions. Allow the people or the person appointed by the candidate to carry the responsibility on part of the candidate. This is why I'm asking that for this one, be it resolved that in the case return officer election workers and what have you, that they be less than the 200 yards from the polling stations so they can effectively carry the responsibility. That's all I'm asking for. 4, the member from Eastern Portland mentioned that they shouldn't change the hour to additional hour because thief walk at night. Thief walk at day too. Thief walk at morning. It don't matter the time. If people want to thief, they want to thief. You can't tell a thief not to thief. Thank you. So I wouldn't say use that. The issue that some of us have urban section of our constituencies. And even though the requirement for employers to allow workers time off to vote, how much hours? 2 hours? 3. Many times the employees do not allow the voters, the employees so to do. And there are areas like in southwestern Catherine, people work in Kingston. And after work, they cannot leave their job in time to reach Old Harbour or Bartons to cast the ballots. That's the only reason I asked for an additional hour. So that every elector will have the opportunity to cast their votes. Because you can't ask the worker to walk for the job to go vote. And tomorrow morning, the employer say you don't have a job. But give them the opportunity so to do. And that's the only reason why I asked for an additional hour for them. I'm asked for an additional hour. And you have maybe 1,000 people come and vote against me. And if we close at 5, I would have won. So that's not the case, right? I didn't think of that. It's just to give the electors the opportunity to go and cast the ballot and don't restrict them at all. 5, the member mentioned the issue of the counterfoil. All I'm saying here is not any hanky-panky and political stuff. There are presiding officers who made the error of not removing the counterfoil and putting the box. But the section of the roper states that in the course of counting the ballot, if the counterfoil is intact, to remove it and count the ballot. So I'm saying there are times when the presiding officer remove the counterfoil and it's torn not along the perforated line but above or below. And you have cases where those ballots are rejected. It's not the fault of the elector that the presiding officer did not make a clean removal. And there are cases in which the perforation was not done correctly. So it caused the ballot to be torn above or below. So once it is removed above or below, it should be counted, just as the presiding officer has the right to remove it at the time of counting. So I'm saying whether it removed above or below the perforated line, it should be a proper ballot. That's what I'm asking for. 6. This is what I'm asking that motion number 6 is the issue of re-verification and renumeration of voters. We have a whole lot of some huge voters in per constituencies. And then they talk the issue of the number of voters, apathy, and those things. And that's nonsense. Do not reflect the true number of votes. So what I ask for here is that we call on the government to provide the necessary funds to have a complete remuneration of electors in this country. So we can have an understanding of the persons that we have. That's all I'm asking for. And I go further, that we just don't ask for it, that we have it done early before we face the next election. Mr. Speaker, as far as it is concerned, it's far-reaching and it would require serious amendment to the Constitution. It would need an referendum to have this amended. So I'm therefore withdrawing private members' motion number 7. Mr. Speaker, you're not hearing me say no? I am saying, based on the far-reaching effect of number 7, what I understand would require a referendum to amend this section of the Constitution. I'm withdrawing section number 7, the resolution number 7, private members number 7, based on the suggestion from the member from St. James. No, she doesn't say that. Mr. Speaker, I ask that you put private members number 1.
All right, so
Recommended.
Mr. Speaker, the amendment, I know the member made some amendments to the motion, which that would have to be noted so that could be put motion as amended, right? Just to provide some clarity to the members, if the motions are carried, the motions then proceed to a committee of the House. And the committees which the motions refer to will then decide on the appropriateness of the motion to be forwarded to make policy changes. So voting for the motions here move them to the committee stage. Just to be clear, it doesn't automatically. So in the case based on the advice from the House, in the case of motion 1, it goes to the infrastructure committee. In the case of motion 2 to 6, it would go, no, 7 has been withdrawn. In the case of motion 2 to 6, it would go to the human resources committee, social and human resources committee. I also made the point that that I think we agree, and I said it to the leader of opposition business, that if the motions are put to the committee, then they would have to get, as the leader of opposition has also asked for, the feedback and input from the electoral, and I'm just creating a context, feedback from the electoral office of Jamaica. The leader of government business, of opposition business, has stated that he would rather that we hear from the ECJ before voting on the motion, as he indicated. So I'm just, for completeness, advising the House. So
May I say that the role of the ECJ will not be affected in this regard itself. What of all of these private motion, they have been to the House before and have gone through the process, through committee, and went to cabinet. At cabinet, then there have been discussion between the Electoral Commission and cabinet as to implementation of what have you. It has gone through all of the committee, but all of these motions I brought them here before. I brought them under your government and under this government. I brought them here before. Everyone has been brought here, but new parliament, the action, it was not concluded then. That's why I brought my new parliament. They were not dealt with completely. That's why I was advised to bring them back here to go through the process again. So I'm asking Mr. Speaker for the approval of private members motion number 1 with the amendment that's removing, including, but not limited to National Works Agency.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the question I have to ask is whether or not to do what you're asking us to do, to send it to committee. Now, hold on a man, hold on. If the motions themselves should not be amended to include that as one of the parts.
No, it's here. It's
No, that amendment that it be sent to committee. You have that. You have to tell me that. You can't just drag me behind you like that. I'm not
Give me a chance.
No, yeah.
I've completed. I just said a while ago. To delete, including but not limited to, and say as well as the National Works Agency. And then if it's approved, then I ask that it go to committee. It's only after approval again. I'll get after amendment. Up to now, Mr. Speaker, I ask that the motion be amended as follows. Number 1. Private members motion number 1 on the order paper be amended by inserting the following as the third prior. And be it further resolved that the Honorable House refer this motion to the Infrastructure and Physical Development Committee for consideration and report. Angela, you agree with that? No, that's why I'm going to put the prior here now. You agree now, Jen? You accept that, Jennifer? Angela? Brothers?
Yes.
Yeah. And for 2, Mr. Speaker, for 2, I delete the priors and substitute thereof. Be it resolved that the relevant provision of the ROPA be amended to enable the intention of the voter to be ascertained instead of mandatory that the voter shall mark at X beside the candidate of his choice. Be it resolved that 41A, subsection 1 of the People Act, be amended to allow the person appointed by the candidate as an agent to be within a precinct of and closer to 20 yards to the polling station, as now specified, so that the agent will be able to carry out the duties for which the agents were appointed. 4, be it resolved that Section 33 of the Representation of People Act be amended, allowing time for polling on an election day to be between the hours of 7 in the forenoon and 6 in the afternoon. And 5,
on a point of order, Mr. Speaker, the proposal of the motion is actually going through all the motions. We are suggesting that as one is not in dispute, that we could take that one, that we could take those that refer to ROPA and the amendments, of course. Those that relate to ROPA be taken separately, and of course 7 has been withdrawn.
Yes, that's my intent. That's my intention. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask private member motion number 1 to be as amended to be approved.
The question is that private motion number 1 be amended as.
Just a point of clarification. I didn't hear that amendment, which is that a lien be placed.
For which one of the motion?
Motion 1. That a lien be placed on a certain percentage of the property, which in the event, because what the motion is doing, Mr. Speaker, it's not really holding the developer accountable. And so the proposal was that a lien be placed on a certain number of the properties at the local authority level. Even so.
No, it requires different set of thing. What I'm doing here, I'm dealing with the responsibility of the government as it stands now. The local authority place a lien or whatever on the properties now. And the developers have to make available funds, large funds with the local authorities. That is used for at least 2 years. That any defect within a 2 years period is used to correct those defects. So I'm saying the title, when the first title issued, then there's responsibility of government to take over those the infrastructure. That's what I'm saying. But there are funds there to take care of those repairs. So I don't think you need any amendment here for that. The funds are there for that. Funds are there for that. And you know, you're a parish council, wasn't council, you know that. So I'm asking that we take the one. Yeah, man, the funds are there. No, I'm telling you, hold on, member, I'm telling you. No, I'm telling you because funds are there and I know it. Look here, as it relates to lien, that has to be dealt with by the local authority. Not related to lien, that's with local authority. No, the lots and so those are local authority because St. Thomas is the first parish council to have instituted that. St. Thomas is the first one to have done that.
Members, here is a suggestion. Do you think we need to take a 5-minute break here?
No.
You don't?
Just finish and we're not done with the agreement. I just ask for people number one with the amendment. No, because we have to just take up number one and move on, man.
Moving on motion 1. So the question is that motion 1, as it is amended, as stated, those in favor, be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
From it now. So, madam, no? Huh? 2 to 6? I've gone through them, only 6 are left now to do. I've prevented all the others. Only 6 now for me to do. As I said before, Mr. Speaker, I'm withdrawing number 7 based on the constitutional issue here. And 6, as I said, be it resolved that the government immediately provide the funds necessary for the electoral office to embark on a total re-verification and enumeration of voting. Number 6, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking for the amendment of private member motion 2 to 6 on the other paper. Each be amended by inserting following at the final prior, and be it further resolved that the Honorable House refer these motion to Human Resources and Social Development Committee for consideration and report.
The request is on the floor. Those in favor? Aye. So are we going to take number 6? Remember, just let me get it clear. Are you asking that 2 to 6 be amended?
No. Each I brought the amendments separately. What I'm saying now, there's no.
So there's a divide.
Than 6.
There's a divide on 2 to 5.
Yeah, we can just take 6.
I would take 6.
And they have divide from 2 to 5.
All right. So the motion number 6, as it is amended, be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it.
Come in.
On 2 to 5. Clark. To 5 is the divide. There is a divide on 2 to 5. So we have to go to a vote. All right, Clark. On each, take them one by one.
All right, so with respect to private members' motion number...
Members, listen carefully.
With respect to private members' motion number 2, this is the vote. Mr. Azan, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Ms. Burchell, Dr. Campbell,
Clark.
Mr. Azan,
Members, if you remain quiet, we will hear the names called and we will know exactly who is answering. Allow the deputy clerk to call the names and person answer yea or nay.
All right, respect to private members motion number 2 on the order paper. Mr. Azan, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown Burke, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Ms. Burchell, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Cha, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Chuck, Mr. Cousins, Mr. Crawford, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Miss Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Filbert, Dr. Dawes, Mr. Golden, Mr. Gordon, Miss Grange, Mr. Green, Miss Hamilton, Mr. Hales, Mr. Hines, Dr. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Miss Jess, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Ambassador Marks, Miss Lee, Mr. Main, Mr. Mackenzie, Mrs. Miller Bennett, Mr. Montague, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Morris, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Newell, Mr. Paul, Mr. Phillips, Miss Perkis, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Dr. Russell, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Seabright, Miss Shaw, Miss Shaw, Mr. Smith, Mr. Terrelong, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Vaz, Darrell Vaz, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams Delroy, Mr. Williams Donovan, Mrs. Williams, and Mr. Witter. Ms. Crawford.
Yeah, the suggestion is if you put specifically that you are asking us to vote on motion 3, 4, and 5 and
call the members' names, then the votes will be for each motion as indicated. So if you could proceed.
Concerning private members' motions 3 to 5 on the order paper, Mr. Azan, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown Burke, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Ms. Burchell, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Chang, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Chuck, Mr. Clark, no sir, Mr. Cousins, Mr. Crawford, Miss Crawford, Miss Crawford, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Miss Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, Dr. Dawes, Mr. Golden, Mr. Gordon, Miss Grange, Miss Grange, Miss Grange, Mr. Green, Miss Hamilton, Mr. Hales, Mr. Hines, Dr. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Miss Jess, Miss Lee, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Ambassador Marks, Mr. Main, Mr. Mackenzie, Mrs. Miller Bennett, Mr. Montague, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Morris, Miss Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Newell, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Miss Perkis, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Dr. Russell, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Seabright, Miss Shaw, Miss Shaw, Mr. Smith, Mr. Terrelon, Mr. Vaz Darrell, Mr. Vaz Dwayne, Mr. Warmington, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams Delroy, Mr. Williams Donovan, Mrs. Williams, and Mr. Witter. Miss Jess, what's that?